and thank you all for being here. I'm Patty Brown, and together we amplify the voices of our community to break down barriers. Throughout the Women's Forum, we're sharing the voices of women from all walks of life to illuminate the challenges that stand in the way of personal and family success and economic stability. Today, we're joined by the writer and filmmaker, Pamela Woolford, who will share her very powerful personal account of injustice and inequity that has impacted her, her family, and an entire industry. Pamela is an incredibly passionate woman, and one of her passions is sharing stories. In fact, she was one of the recipients of a Change Maker Challenge grant from United Way and the Horizon Foundation to help her tell the untold stories of Black visionaries in Colombia. Bringing her passion and artistry to the Women's Forum, I now introduce Pamela Woolford to the Women's Forum 2020. Pamela?
Hey, I'm speaking today from inside my family home. I was thinking earlier about a painting, a reproduction hanging downstairs on our living room wall. It's a portrait of one of my ancestors, Henrietta Davis Washington. She is my grandmother's grandmother. She was enslaved in Virginia. After emancipation, she came alone at 14 to work in Baltimore, where my father was eventually born. My mother came to Baltimore from North Carolina in the 1950s. Her great-grandmother was enslaved there. A woman named Laura Ward, who, after emancipation, was among a small group of Black people to be the first Black people in the state to win a lawsuit against a white person. They sued for the rights to their land. Laura farmed that land. My mother was born on that land. My family, like many Black families after our nation decided their enslavement would finally be illegal, established family farms which were hard won in that intensely racist environment and are now no longer in existence. The farms which nearly 1 million Black families garnered after emancipation were stolen from them using a number of bigoted campaigns and means, including targeted administration of federal policies, discrimination in government programs, fraudulently high tax assessments, the canceling of insurance, swindles, unlawful denying of loans, voter suppression, coercion, extortion, exploitation, intimidation, lynching, police brutality, and other forms of violence. And this happened mostly since the 1950s. In just the 50s and 60s alone, Black farmers lost 6 million acres each and every day in those 2 decades. On average, an area the size of New York Central Park was practically wrested out of the hands of Black people. On my father's side, the son of the woman who was once enslaved, whose portrait hangs downstairs, my Uncle George, was a railroad porter. On my mother's side, my grandmother's brother, my Uncle Will, also worked for the railroads in the 1900s. After emancipation, sharecropping was often a continuation of enslavement through debt slavery. Many Black people sought to better their lives by performing labor in which they could earn tips, rather than living under the oppression of sharecropping, including working as barbers, servants, restaurant workers, and rail car porters. Many so-called employers did not pay the Black people who performed this labor, so the Black workers were only compensated by any money the customer wished to give them. This is in fact how tipping in America came to be commonplace, because white businesses did not think Black people should be paid. Two notorious examples of this were porters who worked for the Pullman Company, which supplied railroad companies with luxury cars, and restaurant workers in urban environments. In the mid-1800s, white people migrated from rural areas to cities to work in factories. These white factory workers were ill-treated by their employers and given sometimes just 15 minutes to leave the factory, get lunch, and return. They would get their lunches at establishments referred to as penny places. They were called penny places because the white workers would slap a penny on the table as a tip for the black workers who served them their food. That penny was given not from the industries these white workers labored for, not from the businesses these black workers labored for, but from the pockets of the poor white people who were being taught in those moments that their mistreatment in America was more palatable because they were still better than the black people who made no wages at all, and they slapped their own pennies down on the table. During enslavement, black people like me were purchased to force them to construct railroads in America. After emancipation, George Pullman, the founder of the Pullman Company, enlisted the labor of black people who had few options for survival to serve food, carry luggage, shine shoes, clean sleeping berths, and supply clean towels and linens in what were called Pullman rail cars. These black laborers would be known as Pullman porters and became highly respected in black communities. From what tips they made, they created savings, helping to build a black American middle class and helping to send their children and grandchildren to college just after enslavement. They started in the face of great adversity, the country's first black union, effectively negotiating over a period of years for better wages and working conditions and helping to pave the way for the civil rights movement decades later. Pullman porters endured mistreatment by racist passengers while supplying first-rate hospitality under abominable work conditions which prevailed for decades. They were made to work 400 hours a month or 11,000 miles, whichever came first, for $25 to $60 for the entire month, from which the porters themselves had to buy the sheets and towels they provided to the rail car travelers, the shoe polish they used to polish the travelers' shoes, and their own uniforms and meals. They were at times made to work 20 hours of shifts in a row and allowed only 1 to 3 hours of sleep at night while sitting upright, and only in the smoking car, and only if there happened to be no passengers in the car at the time. It was under these conditions that the Pullman Rail Car Company soon became the largest employer of black people in the United States. Railcar passengers condescendingly addressed each man who worked as a Pullman porter as George, rather than addressing him by his name. Because they were not paid any wage to speak of, the porters acquiesced to these passengers and endured the stress of often having to feign a grinning air of servitude in order to make the tips that would support them and their families. Pullman porters risked their lives working on the rail cars, not only by continuously returning to the dangers of the South, but by smuggling to black Southerners newspapers like the Baltimore Afro-American, created by, for, and about black people, which were often outlawed in the South or confiscated by the Ku Klux Klan, who threatened violence against distributors of the papers. The distribution of these newspapers by Pullman porters it helped to create the great migration of millions of black people from the South to the North, Midwest, and West by supplying the would-be migrators with information about train schedules, possible jobs, and more promising, safer futures. It was during the Great Migration that my mother came to Baltimore alone at 17. She was away from her rural Black hometown for the first time and knew nothing of life in a northern city. Graduating valedictorian of her high school class, she took money she got as a graduation present and bought a bus ticket to Baltimore. And luckily, a caring Black YWCA dean to whom she told her story lent her money every week for several weeks so that she could live at the Y and eat. A skilled typist and stenographer, my mother daily responded in person to want ads for secretaries listed in the Baltimore Morning Sun. Repeatedly, for weeks, upon arrival to these business offices, she was told the position had already been filled. She remained perplexed as to why she could never arrive early enough to be even considered for the job. An acquaintance had to explain to her that white employers do not hire Black people like her. A generation later, in the late 80s and early 90s, I went on some of my first job interviews for bookkeeping and retail positions. Repeatedly, I was told I was well suited for the job when I phoned in response to want ads, and the story changed when I showed up in person. Once, upon seeing me enter the business where I was scheduled for an interview, the interviewer immediately asked me a couple of quick so-called interview questions while I was still standing, and quickly thanked me for my time, never even inviting me to have a seat or enter the interview room. I was not invited to sit at another interview, and this time, before dismissing me while I was still standing several minutes after I had arrived, the employer asked me if I would be interested in the job, but on one condition, if I would be willing to work for less than what she had told me the job paid on the phone. Still another time, I was told once I arrived in person and the employer saw my face that I must have lied on my resume. Once when looking for a job, I was made to buzz the front door of a high-end jewelry store twice before the proprietor only cracked the door wide enough to tell me my service would not be needed. I worked for a high-end men's and women's clothing boutique, and one day noticed that the store carried suspenders emblazoned with the symbol of a Confederate flag. I asked the owner if he found that problematic, and he fired me on the spot, telling me, one, that the Civil War was a money matter not to be thought of in reference to enslavement, and two, I should get out of his shop for asking him that. Black people have long been more likely than white people to be fired from their jobs or laid off. And today, Black people are overrepresented in industries negatively impacted by social distancing and stay-at-home orders, including retail, hotel, and restaurant workers. Most Black American households do not make enough income to cover the cost of a bare minimum survival budget. And that is partially because certain occupations predominated by people of color and women are legally allowed to pay substandard wages, oftentimes less than a third of what minimum wage is, forcing employees to live off of whatever tips we wish to give them. The restaurant industry is the second largest and fastest growing industry in America, employing nearly 10% of the American workforce. It is also the industry which has 7 out of the 10 lowest paying jobs in America. 4 of those 7 jobs are tipped jobs. More than 1 of every 4 Black restaurant workers lives in poverty. And an even larger percentage of Black restaurant workers struggles to afford the bare minimum needed to survive. The restaurant industry in America is a highly segregated industry, with white men disproportionately hired for higher paying jobs as servers and bartenders in upscale restaurants, and rarely being trapped in positions as bussers and runners at restaurants of any price points. We typically tip based on the price charged for our food. Yet the cost of the food has no bearing on the labor involved in serving it. Tipping more for more expensive food helps ensure that white men make a higher gratuity for the same service, even though those same white men are typically making drastically more per hour and are more likely to be supporting or helping to support a smaller number of people with that higher salary and higher gratuity. Black women are uniquely disenfranchised by tipped employment. About 37% of tipped workers are mothers, and nearly half of them are single mothers. And sexual harassment is rampant in the restaurant industry. It is the largest source of sexual harassment complaints of any industry in the nation. The results of a study by Cornell University found that restaurant workers who are women are tipped more if they have larger breasts, smaller body sizes, and blonde hair. The results of another study by Cornell University found that restaurant goers tipped black servers less than white servers for what the customers themselves deemed the same quality of service. That study followed one from the Yale Law School Journal showing that black cab drivers were tipped less than white ones. The same Southern legislators who opposed laws against lynching were effective in 1938 in ensuring that industries in which black workers were overrepresented, including domestic, hotel, and restaurant service, were excluded from laws mandating a minimum wage. It wasn't until 1966 that a sub-minimum wage was enacted to cover these jobs. It was then that nearly a third of all black workers in America were covered at all by the concept of minimum wage enacted in the 30s for everyone else. And that minimum for those particular jobs was set at a fraction of the minimum for other jobs. Then, in 1996, legislation was passed to effectively ensure that the federal government would no longer raise that sub-minimum wage beyond $2.13 an hour, where it remains today a quarter century later. The poverty rate of tipped workers today is almost twice that of non-tipped workers. This burden falls heaviest on black women, resulting in black women who are tipped workers making an average of $5 less than what white men every hour that they work make for the same labor, and even less than that in some cities like New York, where black women make $8 less an hour. And on top of that, tips are reported to be down 50% since the coronavirus. When you tip black service providers more than 20%, you help to unbrace the long arm of enslavement and systemic racism. I think about that portrait of Henrietta Davis Washington hanging in my living room. It is a reproduction of an Elton Fax painting. This highly acclaimed black artist, born in 1909 in Baltimore, chose to paint her, my grandmother's grandmother. Elton Fax spent much of his career as a visual artist, author, and lecturer, traveling the world, documenting and speaking out about poverty, exploitation, and injustice, especially in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, once saying, quote, exclude a small number of high-salaried and widely publicized athletes and entertainers, exclude also the few blacks occupying highly visible and lucrative places in government and private industry. And what is left is a great mass struggling to attain and thereby fully realize the great American dream. There is much that has not changed for Black people in America since Elton Fax's time. The ramifications of enslavement on American people did not end in the 1860s and did not end in the 1960s, and it has not ended today. The legacy of enslavement is like a runaway train, that only slows given continuous opposing forces imposed by people like you and me who are conscious of the fact that the train is still running. Think of it as each of us having our own car on that train, and together we have the power to change the direction of that train. If we each act individually, we become powerful together. Tip Black service providers more than 20% if you can. Thank you.
Wow, that was so powerful. Thank you, Pamela, for opening our eyes to a legacy of inequity that continues to impact Black workers, and for breaking down barriers with your words. As you said, so many hardworking people don't make enough to survive on. United Way shares your passion to lift up all those who are struggling, and united, we can help turn things around.
Upside down. Who will come and help turn things around?
We're an answer to what's needed. There is so much we can do, not on our own, but as one. Together, me and you. United we stand, united we are. The responders to the call. Together we hope, together we dream. We're a strong and mighty team. We will face every challenge with our heart, our hands, our will. United we stand, united we are, united we can. There is so much need, it's hard to miss. We can't ignore, we're built for this, for such a time as this. United we stand, united we are, the responders to the call. Together we hope, together we dream. We're a strong and mighty team. We will face every challenge with our heart, our hands, our will. United we stand, united we are, united we can. United we stand, united we are, united we can. United we
Oh my gosh, such an uplifting message for these times. That was United Way's very own Franklin Baker, the president and obviously multi-talented CEO of United Way of Central Maryland, with songwriter Angela Bryant. And as the song says, troubled times are brewing. But you know what? Trouble has always been brewing for those who just can't get ahead, no matter how hard they work. There are obstacles and challenges that extend far beyond just what a wage increase could help fix. Today, we'll learn more about what too many women, too many families are up against, and what some local organizations here in Greater Baltimore are doing to break down barriers to help people who are struggling to get by. I am so pleased to introduce our panelists, who are a strong and mighty team in their own right. We have with us today Heidi Daniel, Chief Executive Officer of the Enoch Pratt Free Library, Dr. Saundra Kurtinitis, the President of the Community Colleges of Baltimore County, Tamla, Olivier, BGE Chief Customer Officer and Senior Vice President, Customer Operations, and Bita, Dayhoff, the President of the Community Action Council of Howard County. Welcome, ladies. Before we begin, I have a question for each of you. Who is your Alice hero? Heidi, let's start with you.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm going to say my parents who raised me for, raising me in an Alice household and teaching me resilience and compassion and empathy.
Oh, that's great. Well, I think we're probably going to hear a little bit more about that. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Heidi. Saundra, who's your Alice hero?
Okay, there are many Alice heroes, but the one I think of most is the single mom who's working hard every day and also attending CCBC at night, semester after semester, to create opportunity for herself and her family.
Wow, thank you very much. Tamla?
So my Alice hero is a woman that we'll call Sarah, but Sarah was battling substance abuse and at one point found herself standing on the Ben Franklin Bridge between Philadelphia and Camden, New Jersey, contemplating suicide. And a few people worked to extend a helping hand. And she actually did the really heavy lifting to get herself back on track, get custody of her children again, and is thriving. And to me, a true hero and an inspiration. So anytime I'm having a bad day, feeling sorry for myself, I think about this warrior and I say, get a grip, you got it.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So this is somebody that you know personally?
Yes.
Wow. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. And Bita, who is your Alice hero?
Yeah, my Alice hero are all of the frontline workers with young families who are juggling between their demanding jobs, going to school, teaching their children at home, and trying to keep their heads above the water. So many of them have parents that they're also taking care of. And in the midst of all this uncertainty, trying to stay healthy and safe themselves. My hat is off to them.
Wow. Wow. Listen, we're going to have a great panel today. There's no doubt about it. Heidi, let's kick off this panel with you. We've heard a lot about Alice during our discussions and our series, but you yourself grew up in an Alice household. So tell us, what was that like for you?
I think I need to start by saying, of course, that I need to recognize a couple of key privileges that I had even growing up. One, of course, obviously is I'm white. And then two is I had two parents who loved me, which is a really solid foundation. And although we didn't have a financial safety net, we definitely had an emotional safety net. And that can make a huge difference in people's lives. But for us, my dad was a factory worker with an 8th grade education. He dropped out of school in 8th grade, which isn't really unusual from where I came from because there was large families. And at the time, factory work was, considered pretty solid. And my mom finished high school, which she is still very proud of. My father passed away in 2001, but my mother is still here with me. And she, had cleaned houses, worked in the school where I was going to school as a cafeteria worker. She worked in a hotel as a housekeeper. She cleaned individuals' houses. She worked in housekeeping in a hospital. So I saw my parents working hard my whole life to take care of me. And I'm adopted, and we grew up in, a little trailer park right in front of the refinery, right around the corner from the factory where my dad worked. So this is a pretty typical lower working class household that I was raised in, where at any moment, if my dad was laid off or went on strike, we would find ourselves, on government assistance or really struggling to just keep our heads above water on the day to day. But it was also a place where my parents focused very heavily on education and possibility. When they adopted me, my dad was functionally illiterate, and my mother, again, graduated from high school, but never loved school, but they wanted me to have this deep sense of love and appreciation of education. So I was really fortunate because from the time I can remember, my parents took me to the public library and introduced me to books and introduced me to the idea of, the world being full of windows and occasionally mirrors where, we can really see the possibilities for ourselves in other realms. So they really wanted to instill in me this idea that I could be more, and they really didn't know how to get me to college. It wasn't like that was a very common thing where I was living, but they figured the first place to start was just a deep love of school. So that's where they began, and it was the great gift.
Heidi, how old were you when you were adopted?
I was adopted as an infant. Yeah. So I, born in the 70s, so through Catholic Charities. So sort of the end of that time where, good Catholic girls gave their babies up for adoption in the early 70s. There wasn't really birth control or, family planning at that time. So I was at the end of that sort of boom, and as a child, so infant. Yeah.
Well, you tell an interesting story that I think is a good reminder that it sounds like you actually had a very, functional growing up. You had parents that loved you, and that they did everything they could to support a life that you could thrive in. So it's really.
Yeah. I'm very fortunate in that way. I think what's key to remember is just all the ways in which you really have to struggle to give that basic foundation. So it was never easy, right? So I have very clear memories of as a child of a lot of strife in our household and a lot of pain in our household because we weren't always entirely certain what was going to be happening in the future. At this time, the factories are sort of collapsing in on themselves. There's clear uncertainty. My father had health issues. I remember very clearly being in the grocery store and my mom telling me to go look at the magazines because she was going to pay with food stamps and she didn't want anyone to see me standing with her while she did that. And I also very clearly remember, the first time someone called me white trash and what that felt like. I remember being really shocked. I was like, I'm a cheerleader. Your economic status defined who you were in some ways.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing your story and making personal for us what so many deal with daily. Your love of reading, that's amazing. Your parents teaching you that, taking you to the library, obviously that's influenced your career. And the library, of course, is such a wonderful resource for all of us. But please connect for us how the library can be, such a key resource for Alice's in our community.
Yeah, so I think for me, it provides the foundation for enriching what you want to do, right? So we understand, and we've worked really hard to try to remove barriers for individuals. For example, we removed fines because we didn't want you to have to make the choice between the bus or the fines. If you're a single mom who has to get up in the morning and get your kids to school and get yourself to work and you're doing public transportation and getting out the door is a really stressful, exhausting moment, I don't want you to then come into the library to get a book for your child and us to tell you, no, you can't do that because you owe us this $10.50, which is just another choice that you have to make. I think, one of the things that was ingrained in me growing up, what I would see is the choices my parents had to make all the time. And also sort of the complications that come with being the working poor, right? Like, so all the forms you have to fill out, all of the data, and all the ways that can be complicated with our race and ethnicity, and if you're an immigrant. So we wanted to simplify that as much as possible. So at the Pratt, we've really worked to remove a lot of barriers that could get in the way of people accessing our services. And once we get you in the door, we've started everything from a program that offers a high school diploma completely online on your time for free. We will give you the scholarship for the classes. We will give you the Chromebook so that you have a device at home. We'll give you the hotspot if you need internet. You know, we have all of these databases and resources. Right now, we're checking out a ton of you know, hotspots and things so that people can work at home. But we really view ourselves and our role in the community is to help you get to wherever it is you want to go. And our resources are free. And it's about access, because one of the things that you have to remember is in households of the working poor in particular, in those Alice households, there's not the same level of access that you see in a lot of middle class and upper middle class households. So there's not access to social capital, there's not access to financial capital, and a lot of that can mean there's not access to the resources you need to really redefine and move forward. And that's what the Pratt is here to do, is to work with our community partners and get those folks that need us, you know, working in the direction they want to work in.
Wow. Your parents must be so proud of you, and I'm sure that you regularly go back and think about your childhood and how it impacted your now obviously amazing career. So thank you so much for sharing that story. So let's turn to, I think it's Saundra next.
Yes.
Saundra. Heidi talked about the importance of education to her, both personally as well as professionally. And as you know, one of United Way's key focus areas is education. And the Women United group does a lot of work in the community supporting young children in school. We know, of course, that education is key to building strong, resilient families and communities. As president of CCBC, the largest provider of higher education in Greater Baltimore, tell us about the students you serve and how your programs help them get ahead and help them improve our local economy.
Well, thank you. Those are great questions for me. And I want to say I really enjoyed hearing Heidi's story and her reflection of how she's connected with Alice and how much they work at trying to serve the Alice population. So I will say that CCBC and United Way really are two agencies joined at the hip. Our college is huge. We had 55,000 students last year, and so many of them truly are at the Alice population level. We serve the most economically disadvantaged population, both within our region and actually across the state. So let me just give you a couple of statistics that I think will tie this together. First and foremost, average age, roughly 38. Most of our students will need some kind of financial aid. So that's probably 53, 54, 5% of our students will need that. We are now a minority majority institution, which really puts pressure on us to work hard.
Can you explain that, Saundra? Minority
majority, yes. That means that roughly 53% of the students attending CCBC this year are minority populations. So largely 37% African American, about 8% Hispanic, about 7% Asian, and lots of mixed race students in between. And where that leads me is to say that on any given day in one of our classrooms, whether we're virtual or in seat, you will find a welfare mom sitting next to a doctor's son. That's the continuum, economic continuum that we serve. And 61% of our students are women. And so, as you might expect, very, very strong programming in the health professions, for example, in cybersecurity. We have over 100 degree programs that we offer, but the place where I think we serve the Alice population first and foremost is through about roughly about 200 different short-term certifications. You need a job, you need training to get that job. You can come to CCBC And within a very short time, we can equip you with skills that will take you right into the workplace at a good starting wage. And I'll just give you an example of one of the programs that we do with our county, with Baltimore County. It's called the Job Network. If you want to apply for welfare within the Baltimore County environs, you must sign up for CCBC's Job Network program. That's about a 3-month program where we will help you get skills, basic skills to get a job, basic skills to get training, and pretty much within those 3 months' time, I think about 90% of the people who participate in this have found a job that will give them a basic living wage. It's the kind of work we do here at CCBC. That's why I say we're such great partners with United Way, and we're very dependent upon United Way 211, for example, to help our students. Students come to CCBC with extraordinary life challenges. That's why I referenced that student at the beginning when you asked us about our Alice hero. I don't know how they do it sometimes. Some people take 2 and 3 buses to get to their classes, and at the same time, they've got to find provisions for childcare and so forth. Just, you know, I always say, if we community college folks, if we weren't serving at a community college, we'd probably be social workers, because truly that's who we look to help, to bring opportunity, because we know that economic revitalization comes right through our front door. And we're glad we're here to help as many people as we do.
Yeah, you know, it's fascinating to think about the storyline around a woman who is on welfare sitting next to a son of a doctor who you would assume then has resources, has different set of resources. And then just that the experience that you are creating with regard to just diversity of backgrounds, that in and of itself, I'm sure, is quite valuable to all your students.
Mm-hmm. And you know, every year, 55,000, 60,000 students here, every year, we help 13,000 of those 55,000 complete something that is important to him or to her. So
that's real impact. That is real
whether
impact.
It's a degree, a certificate, or to transfer on to our 4-year institutions. So we're very proud of that.
Well, just listening to that history and then thinking about the world that we're currently living in, you are really relevant at this point in time with regard to the challenges that the pandemic has introduced into our community. Can you talk a little bit about the specifics as to how you've addressed those challenges and helping students?
Thank you. I love the opportunity to tell our big story, because last spring, when the college had to go dark on March 16, we had about 15,000 students in our credit classes, 4,200 withdrawals from people who could not handle the switch to remote or online learning. So that meant did not have the equipment, did not have high-speed internet, did not have the skill to be able to use those facilities, even if they did, and did not, in many instances, have a home environment. So I tell you that detail because what that said to us as we began to go through the summer and on to planning for the fall, we knew we could not disenfranchise that many students from accessing what our college offers. So we experimented in the summer. We had most of our classes online, but we did about 70 right here on the campuses. We have 6 sites. So we knew that if we worked really hard at building the right kind of hygiene and safety protocols, we could actually offer in-seat instruction for people who needed them. And I'm really proud to say to you, our college is open. We may be one of the few 2- or 4-year institutions in this state who are actually open. Any service you need, you can come here and get it. But what we did was we tailored this to what I call an 80-20 measure. So 20% of our classes are online. I'm sorry, 20% of our classes are in seat. That's over 6 sites, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. That means 80% of our classes are still remote or online, but we have about 4,000 students taking classes in seat.
Wow.
And we built the safety protocols to make it work for all of those who needed to come. So if you want to take a class, you need an advisor, you have to register, you can come to our campus and do it. But I want to just mention one other thing that was a big factor in our success. And that is we rolled out an aggressive tuition-free program this summer. We took every funding stream we had and we put it into one pot, totals about $35 million. And we have managed to give probably close to 50% of our students, maybe even a little bit more, have managed to get full tuition and fees covered, or at least full tuition or partial. We know we've made a difference for people who otherwise would not be able to access the incredible programming that we have here.
Oh my God.
Hard work. It was really hard work to do this, but we've done it.
Wow. Well, there's no doubt you have job satisfaction. So good for you. Thank you so much for leading. And thank you so much for sharing that story. You know, I don't think we understand enough about these great, great stories and how our community assets are responding to, you know, obviously incredible challenges being faced, particularly by the Alice's of the world, as was referenced, right? We are privileged ourselves.
Yeah, it would be the Alice people who need to come to the college to be on site and sit in front of a teacher.
Yeah,
they can do that.
Wow. Well, that's so great. Thank you. Wow. Tamla, as we learned from Saundra, the pandemic is creating a whole population of people that suddenly can't pay for things they used to. And we know that people are falling behind on bills because their hours weren't what they thought, or they were cut, or whatever the challenges are, including just losing their jobs. So tell us what BGE is seeing and how your company is responding.
Yeah, so for BGE, our Alice could be an employee, it could be a community member, it can also be our customer. And right now, from a customer perspective, we recognize that COVID is absolutely impacting people's ability to keep up, right? So you already had folks who were struggling day to day just to make it. And then you compound that with COVID and people losing their jobs and people for the first time ever having to ask for help and to get assistance that were not in that position a year ago. So what we're seeing is arrearages or past due balances have doubled since March to $80 million. That's significant. We have not seen the number of people who have those arrearages grow. So what that tells us is the people who are already struggling are struggling more, and then a few more folks who maybe were not in that position are now struggling. So very, very alarming numbers for us. What we did in early March, before the governor issued an executive order, we actually discontinued all terminations for customers. We also went down a path of reconnecting customers who had been previously disconnected. And we started communicating far more actively and aggressively with our customers to say, we're here to help. Please call us. Please reach out. There's energy assistance out there. We also have various payment options. The group that I get most concerned about is, as women, especially heads of household, we tend to take on a lot, right? And most of these women absolutely have a big S on their chest, and they usually make things happen. And what happens is you might not be raising your hand asking for assistance, because most of the time as women, we got it, right? We can take care of it. We can handle it. But I do think there's been some undue stress and burden and pressures being put upon people. Heidi, you talked about it. It is an administrative nightmare to even get assistance. So now I have to prioritize, am I getting energy assistance? Am I getting housing assistance? Am I getting food assistance? Am I getting, applying for unemployment, and that system is not working the way I expected it to? So I have to prioritize where I'm spending my time, effort, and energy just to keep food on our plates and be housed, right? And so energy is probably not one that people are prioritizing immediately, especially during the moratorium. So really concerned about that. The bottom line is OHEP has been very vocal about the fact that they have over $100 million in energy assistance.
Can you tell us what
It
OHAP
is the Office of, yes, it's the Office of Home Energy Programs.
Thank you.
And the bottom line is that seems like a lot of money.
It does.
But the arrearage issue is more than $100 million right now across the state of Maryland. So we want our customers to call us right away, call us today, in fact, and we will help put you in contact to get additional energy assistance, to get help with your bills. We have put payment arrangements in place that allow you to pay small increments over a longer period of time, up to 24 months, as low as $10 a month. So really wanting to ensure that this is not that burden that our customers have to be worried about, that additional thing. We also recognize that we needed to provide additional funding to the fuel fund, which was about $1.5 million, but at last check, only $16,000 had been tapped into. So there is money available. We just need, we just need people to pick up the phone, call us. We can help you through that process so that it does not feel as burdensome and is not as overwhelming. We can walk you through that.
Wow. You know, I have heard of some of those programs, certainly. And so, you know, it's not surprising necessarily that BG&E has so much to offer with regard to helping, but it is a little surprising to know that information may not be readily available to those that are in need of the help. So thank you for sharing that. I'd like to just also ask you about BG&E as an organization, because you're obviously a very important organization and employer in the state. And I'm sure that there's a lot of other things that you're doing to help the community and help them cope with the impact of the pandemic. So do you have anything else to share in that regard?
Sure, and Saundra touched on this a little bit, but we know the digital divide is real. It was real before the pandemic, and with virtual learning that has become more evident. We also recognize that there's an educational divide. And so brown kids in particularly, they need to be in the classroom, right? Because they may not have the home life that allows them to really take full advantage of virtual learning. So we've started a new program called Digital Equity, partnering with students and teachers, PCs for People, as well as the Baltimore Digital Equity Coalition, really trying to expand access to both students and teachers, because it's not just students where this digital divide exists. So getting computers to them, laptops to the teachers and students as well. Another piece that you brought up, Patty, is really around employment, right? And we know that is another focus area for United Way. We have a smart energy workforce development program, and that's a joint effort with various local agencies, but also career technology schools. So the goal is to get folks, not just students straight, out of middle school or high school, but anyone who wants to take advantage of these work programs, so that over the next 3 years, our plan is to have 600 participants who will be trained and employable by either us or one of the vendor partnerships that we currently have. So those have been some areas of focus. And then from an employee perspective, we know that Alice works for BG, right? And so backup childcare and dependent care, so people aren't having to make a decision between taking care of my child and being gainfully employed. That was really important for us. We also recognize that during this time—
Can you talk a little bit more about that? That's fascinating. Like how did you all think through that?
Just really expanding partnerships, making sure that our parents knew exactly what was available in the way of childcare, subsidies, things like that, to kind of ease that burden of childcare, because obviously we have first responders and essential employees that have to come to work, right? to keep your power on, to keep you safe and ensure everything is reliable, we still have a huge part of our workforce that actually is out in the field every single day.
Yeah.
So we didn't want them to have to be challenged with, how am I taking care of my child and staying employed? So that was absolutely a focus. We also recognize that health issues during these times and mental health issues have become a little more pronounced. As well, we've seen some uptick in domestic violence. And so we actually hired full-time a health and wellness coach. And she is able to do one-on-one sessions with employees. She does group sessions. She will partner with us on connecting employees to the right resources. We also have an employee assistance program that will connect you to mental health services, wellness services. If you need legal help, it will connect you to that as well. So really just what are we offering to make sure that our customers as well as our employees were able to focus on kind of the whole person, not just one aspect.
Yeah, thank you for pointing out that so many of our wonderful employers in the state do indeed have Alice's as employees, and so I'm sure it's true that the programs that you just described are probably more relevant in the pandemic, but they're necessary all the time.
That's right.
And I know that BG is a leader in that regard. So thank you for sharing all those details. I want to just ask you one more question, Tamla, and that is that I know you're involved as a board member in other roles with a number of local not-for-profits that help people. One of them is Catholic Charities, which I've also been on the board and been involved there. My Sister's Place, I believe, is an organization that you are familiar with and work with. In fact, the video we shared of the Women's United work in the community was filmed at My Sister's Place. So from a leadership perspective, can you tell us why civic engagement is important to you and what it brings to your work at BG&E and what it brings to you as a satisfied woman in our community?
I feel like we have all of these hidden gems across Baltimore that are really working to uplift all communities, and we don't always get to highlight those organizations and highlight the impact that they're actually having on people's lives, like every single day. And so for me to be part of even just a little part of lifting up communities and partnering with these phenomenal organizations. My Sister's Place in particular, I feel like is this hidden gem right across the street from the library. And they serve meals every single day, 3 meals a day to women and children, which is phenomenal. But that's not all they do. They have case management services that will put you in contact from anything from healthcare to mental health to social services. They will help you get a license or state ID or social security card, which most of us maybe take for granted. We have upstairs somewhere in a cabinet or on a desk. But if you don't have these things, it prevents you from getting aid and assistance and or a job or housing. And so it's a big deal. And they are able to help women really get back on their feet, which I think is phenomenal. So for me, it's just a blessing to be part of organizations that are doing these wonderful things to help people across the board.
Tamla, thank you so much. And you absolutely are right. We have a lot of hidden gems in our community, organizations that are committed to meeting the needs of our neighbors. So I appreciate that. And we have one of those hidden gem representatives here today. So Bita, you are with the Community Action Council of Howard County. So tell us a little bit about your work and how that work creates opportunity for the Alice's of the world, but also some of the barriers that you've seen as you do your work in serving that population.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. Community Action Council is the designated anti-poverty organization in Howard County, and our mission is to diminish poverty, enable self-sufficiency, and advocate for low-income families. So the question on the table would be, well, how do we accomplish our mission? We do that in a couple of ways. First and foremost, by delivering 4 core services to families who are struggling, and those services are energy assistance. Very thankful to Tamla and Baltimore Gas and Electric, BGE, for the work that they do and the partnership that they have with us in supporting low-income families. We provide food assistance through our food bank and 14 other pantries that we have here in Howard County, realizing that not everybody can access our corporate food bank area, and some people just feel comfortable going to their local churches or local communities. So we provide the food to those pantries so that they can distribute it to their clientele right here in Howard County. We provide early childhood education program for 344 3 and 4-year-olds. We have 4 centers, 4 Head Start centers, and which are nationally accredited and also accredited by Maryland State Department of Education. And we also provide housing assistance to families who are facing eviction or have already been evicted and have found affordable housing and are looking to move in. And as you know, a lot of the landlords not only charge families the rent, but they have a security deposit attached to that rent. Sometimes a month worth of security deposit, or sometimes 2 months worth of rent for the security deposit. And families who are struggling to really get by don't have a month or 2 months of savings to be able to put roof over their heads. So we support them with that. Organizationally, we really have 2 approaches. One is stepping in the time of a family's crisis and eliminating that crisis. And then our other approach is a full whole family approach, the 2-generation approach, where, because we know poverty does not end with one-time assistance for eviction, prevention funds, or energy assistance or food assistance. The only way we can end poverty, the only way we can help a family move up the Maslow of hierarchy, hierarchy of need, is to really bundle these programs and to focus not just on the child, but also on the parent. So for the families who are in our early childhood education program, we are sometimes very lucky to have the kids for 2 to 3 years. And then we work with the parents, most of the time single mom with multiple children under the age of 5. And we work with them to for rental assistance, energy assistance. So we combine all of the programs that we have. They receive food and rent subsidy and energy subsidy, and their child is in a high quality early childhood education program. And then we know that most of the families get in trouble because they haven't built any assets, because many of the moms or families that we serve, they have not finished high school, or they don't have a higher education degree. So we focus them on their own goals that will help them through this path to self-sufficiency. We call this a Dream Savers program. We partner with the families, and as we are subsidizing some of the costs that has been challenged for them, early childhood education, energy, food, housing, we ask them to start saving. We have them partner with a financial institution. Many of them is the first time they've opened a checking account. So we partner with financial management organizations, so they enroll in classes. We have an employment coach here. We have a life coach here that supports them. And through this path, they can choose from 3 goals: either to go back to school, or start a micro business, or purchase a home.
Wow.
And for every dollar that they save, we match it by 2. So,
Wow.
and it's a formula that works time and time again. It takes time, it takes intention, it takes intensity, but we know that families did not fall to this cycle of poverty overnight, and they cannot get out of it overnight. So we really wrap our arms around them through this process, and we see so many moms who graduate from college, buy a home. Meanwhile, the children are thriving. They've gone past our pre-K and Head Start program. They're thriving in school and doing a great job. So really, again, organizationally, we try to address the cyclical pattern of poverty, and the generational poverty, if somebody is born in it, and then the situational circumstances that come up, because as we've been talking about, in Howard County, there about 24% of our population is the ALICE population. And you asked about challenges. The challenges that many of those families are not eligible for traditional government fund programs of assistance. So we have to find different means of supporting them because they're struggling, no less.
Yeah, I think that's a data point that I think people may not understand, that more than a third, I think, of households that live in Howard County can't afford the cost of living there. And so I love the bundled and family-based family approach. And it sounds like you keep your clients with you for a period of time to really move them through, hopefully from barrier to barrier. Just give us a few highlights about how your work has been tweaked or changed or required different focus in view of the pandemic.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, everything has changed in our world. We went from being a really traditional service provider face to face in the office to having to go virtual very quickly. Our early childhood education program, we have 4 schools, as I said, they closed on March 16th. By mid-April, we had online learning and virtual learning for the little ones at home. And interesting that we've been talking about the digital divide. We provided tablets for all of our students because we knew that they were going to be challenged if we didn't. And we made sure that they all had internet connection at home so that they can partake in the virtual learning opportunity that was being provided to them. But what we saw was that the digital divide really does not close by providing somebody a tablet or even internet connection. Parents needed support, needed translation, needed to be coached.
That's for sure.
And
Isn't that true?
Yeah. And then once the school opened and the school-age siblings went back to school, those tablets for the 3 and 4-year-olds were no longer available to the 3 and 4-year-olds. So we have found our way through this process and have put in play different solutions for the problems as they have presented themselves. And that's been an interesting learning experience for us organizationally as we look at removing barriers. Families don't have to come to the office to apply for energy assistance or housing assistance. They can now, for those who have access, they can do that through the internet. We held up.
Is there a story of someone the Community Action Council served that stands out in your mind, a person or a family?
Oh, sure. We have a family who came into our program with 2 little ones, a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old. They both enrolled in our Head Start program, and mom was not working at the time, and dad had a part-time job. Once we enrolled the children in the program and started learning a little bit more about the family, we helped dad get a full-time job. We helped mom enroll in college. Fast forward 6 years, she has a nursing degree and is working at an emergency room in a an amazing local hospital here. As I said, I mean, we have many families who have gone through our Dream Savers program and have succeeded tremendously. And with the pandemic, we held up what we saw, what happened immediately. Those 14 pantries that we have, 10 of those 14 closed, with the churches closing down, with the schools closing down, community centers closing down. So we had to go to the people. So we held up from March until end of August, 53 pop-up pantries, and served 53,000 Howard County residents who endured standing in long lines in order to get help for their families.
Oh my gosh.
Adjusted and been nimble and agile as situations have come up.
Thank you, Bita. And now I'd like to ask all of our panelists one last question. It's clear from this discussion that serious and systemic changes are needed so that people who are working hard can finally reap the rewards of their effort. But as they say, a journey starts with a single step. What are some quick or simple fixes, some barriers that can be quickly broken?
So my big pet peeve is I would love it if there was a common app that people could complete for any service that they needed, from energy assistance to healthcare to housing, so that administrative maze is gone. It's an overwhelming burden to have to pull together different papers to get qualified for 25 programs that, typically speaking, have the same qualification documents that are required.
Oh, wow.
One-stop shop.
Yeah. Okay. I like it. We're on it. So Heidi, what about you? What barriers do you see that you think we should be able to address?
Yeah, so I'm going to echo that. Let's start taking the work out of being the working poor. I think it's unfair, to say the least, that we expect so much of people who are already in situations of struggle and who are indeed working hard just to maintain a sort of basic level of prosperity, or prosperity is too strong of a word, a basic level of living. I think the other thing we can all do right now is look at our ways that we interact with one another and remember that you don't know what it took for the person across from you to be there today, right? So I try to remember that whenever I'm having interactions with my staff or the public. I don't know what it took for them to get to the table across from me. And if I can show just a basic level of human compassion and respect, I've probably already gone a long way in improving their day at the very least.
Wow. Oh, listen, goosebumps. Couldn't agree with you more. It's so lovely. Thank you. Saundra, how about you? Barriers?
Yeah.
Solutions?
I'm impressed by the words of our panelists today, and it gives me great pleasure to make sure our college is a resource right there to be helping. I'm also very touched by the words that we just heard. And if I would add anything, and I like Tamla's idea of an app through which we could coordinate all of this, but that's probably not going to happen too soon. But I'd love to suggest, as we look to work with our people, looking through the lens of the people we have to serve. That's, I think, what both Tamla and Heidi were suggesting. And you're right, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. And it'd be nice if we could get people to just pick up the phone, and we, each of us, would be there to help with a smile on our face and a smile in our heart.
Yeah, sounds like that first step is compassion. So thank you again for that. And Bita, we'll end with you. What barriers are you losing sleep over every night because you know you can knock them down?
I would say to get rid of some of the barriers would be to live by the golden rule, and for employers to provide flexibility and create a culture that is more understanding and empathetic about the circumstances of a person's life. Treat people like we want to be treated.
Thank you so much to Heidi, Saundra, Tamla, and Bita for sharing your great insights and your stories with us. It was a great conversation. We learned so much. And thanks everyone for joining us today for our third session of the Women's Forum 2020 Digital Series. We look forward to seeing you next week for our final session, where we will talk with New York Times bestselling author Stephanie Land. the author of Made, Hard Work, Low Pay, and a Mother's Will to Survive. We're building a powerful network of those who are committed to helping people in our region who don't earn enough to afford basic needs and to highlight the barriers and challenges to financial stable lives so many hardworking people face. I'm challenging you to take our 21-day Barrier Breaker Challenge. That's right, take one action a day for 21 days to help hardworking people who are struggling to get by. We've been sharing some ideas throughout this session, but here's a few more.
Hey there, I am Stephanie Land, the author of Made, Hard Work, Low Pay, and a Mother's Will to Survive. I wrote my book because I wanted to shine a spotlight on the hardworking people in our country and those who are working 1, 2, or even more jobs just to struggle to get by. And I'm not talking about only the 2.5 million domestic workers, but the members of the service industry and the people who take care of our kids in daycares and when they go to school. These people have a job that's essentially to make our lives easier, and we're failing them by not paying them a living wage. And I hope that and want those invisible, forgotten people and their stories to come to light. Change isn't going to happen until we see each other and hear each other and grow in compassion for our fellow human beings. Please join me at the United Way Women's Forum to learn about how you can bring the invisible to light and help the overworked and underpaid. I'll see you then.